how many people, but I was hoping, if we can be really brief, to go around everybody and get a really quick introduction, where you're from, what your role is, and maybe just one thing that you're interested in learning from this group of people. So Nathan, you're in my top corner. Would you mind starting us off?
Now, Probs, hi everyone. I'm Nathan Islip. I'm the Manager of Design and Place at Yarra Rangers Council, and we're just putting together a policy around planning for place. So universal design is critical to that.
Awesome. Thank you. Aaron?
Yep, so I'm from the Mornington Peninsula Shire. I work in asset management at the moment, but I've worked across infrastructure planning as well, which, this is of great interest too. So I guess we're the ones entering the asset information at the moment in asset management. So yeah, all of this stuff is very interesting to us.
Great, thank you. Apeksha?
Hi everyone, I'm Apeksha. I'm an occupational therapist and I currently work at Federation University as a lecturer in OT department. I'm also a researcher and of course my research interest is universal design. That's what my doctorate was on. So I'm really looking forward to, any research opportunities or policies, stuff like that. Thank you.
Fantastic, thank you. James?
Hi everyone, James Dunn from Hobsons Bay City Council. I'm a social planning and policy officer as well as acting Metro Access officer and all those different functions. So I'm really interested in seeing of the councils who do have a universal design policy, how they're going about implementing that. I'm keen to pick up a few ideas that way.
Thank you, James. Kathy,
Any ideas?
Can we hear you now?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh,
do you want to go?
Don't know how that happened. So Kathy Basterfield, I'm actually a speech pathologist and I actually specialise in writing easy English, which is the unwritten, the unspoken part of universal design that everyone seems to forget all about. I also work with people with multiple and complex needs who don't use speech, but I'm here very specifically looking at increasing awareness of easy English.
Great, thank you, Kathy. Michael I've never been able to pronounce your surname. I've seen it many times. Uniacke, is it? Are you there, Michael?
Yes. Hi, this is Michael Uniacke. In disability planning at Bangor City Council. I'm particularly interested in how we can integrate universal design so it becomes a normal part of the planning and development processes. We're going to have Michael Walker come to us, and then COVID hit, so that was that. But now I'm just picking up the threads again. Glad to be here. Thanks, Virginia.
Thanks, Michael. Good to have you here. I've got Michael Taggart now.
Hello, everyone. I'm from City of Salisbury, which is a Northern Metropolitan Adelaide Council. I'm Inclusion Project Officer, and my primary role is the oversight of our access and inclusion plan. My particular interest, and I guess there are two, firstly is to develop our universal design policy and more particularly application guidelines, starting with the built form public realm, but moving our universal design focus to all areas, including communication and information and programs and services.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Great. I think you'll find some alignment there too, Michael. Mark Canage, you've just popped up on my top left. So do you want to go next?
Yes, I'm the chair of the City of Parramatta's Access Advisory Committee. I'm a member of the Cumberland Council Safety and Access Committee, State Library of New South Wales Access Committee, and I'm a lifetime member of the Centre for Universal Design Australia.
Wow, that's a lot of strings to your bow. Thanks for joining us, Mark.
I left a few off, but that'll do for now.
That's great. Is it pouring with rain where you are?
It's intermittent pouring.
Yeah. Feeling for you guys up there. Michael P. Walker, you're next on my screen.
Thanks, Virginia. My name's Michael Walker. I'm the Senior Principal Advisor for Universal Design for Government I sit within the Victorian Health and Human Services Building Authority, and I'd probably want to just to share what commitment the Victorian government's doing in regard to universal design. I've been a practitioner in universal design for many years. I was one of the first access auditors back in '94 that started the whole movement up. So we've come a long way from there. So I would like to just share my approach and also what government's doing in regards to UD. And I will, yep.
I've got you sort of scheduled in for after everyone's done their intros. So I've made sure that we leave about half an hour for that discussion next. Is that all right if we push pause till then? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Sorry to cut you off. Yoshi, you're next.
Oh, hi, I'm Yoshi. I'm from City of Casey. I'm in the Inclusion and Wellbeing team. I'm holding the positive aging portfolio, but I am representing all of our Inclusion and Wellbeing team. So definitely interested and keen to hear from other councils about what their projects on universal designs are looking like. So yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you for coming. Annie? Ireland?
Sorry, I was just fighting to get off mute.
Yeah.
I'm Annie Ireland. I'm the Client Solutions Director at the Centre for Inclusive Design, which is a form of human-centred design. And I was interested in this group to help contribute ideas to connect people with each other, to advocate for inclusive design and human-centred design, and to add anything I possibly can of value for resources and anything that people need in that respect.
Awesome, thanks. It's great to have your support. David O'Reilly.
Hi, yeah, David O'Reilly from the City of Port Phillip. I'm Senior Urban Designer. I've worked on a few hospital precincts at various councils over the years, and I'm hoping that to improve, let's say, the interface of public-private realm to make sure that it's universally accessible and also very interested in some of the other work that other councils have been doing to advocate for better outcomes for their own facilities upgrades.
Great, thanks, David. Emily, are you with us at the moment?
Yeah, I'm having big connection issues today.
Okay.
My bill, I don't know what the problem is. I'm from Cardinia Shire Council, and we have been working hard on the last couple of years to implement our enhanced design standard, which is based on Universal Design Framework, and we're also implementing a project management framework. So be interesting to hear, really looking forward to hearing what other people are doing in this space and what the future looks like in universal design moving forward.
Cool, thanks, Emily. I'm sure everyone's keen to hear a lot more from you as well. Julia Wanhill, yeah, sorry, I'm terrible with pronunciations. Julia, are you there?
Good afternoon, everybody. So my name is Julia Warnhill and I'm the Access Planner at City of Port Phillip. And Virginia, thank you so much for organising this network. I think this will really not only, be helpful in terms of knowledge sharing and learning from others, but hopefully also accelerate progress because, yeah, I'm very keen to see that happen. So thank you.
No, it's my absolute pleasure. So, yeah, great. Thank you for all your support. I've got Amanda May.
Hi, Virginia. Lovely to see you again. And those people that don't know me, Amanda May, Disability Inclusion Officer at Yarra Ranges Council, and very interested in the place-based approach. We've got lots of small townships in Yarra Ranges. For those that don't know, Yarra Ranges has the geographical area size of Canberra, so and there's a lot of topographical issues and a lot of aging infrastructure. In fact, I met Michael, I think, at a meeting about the Kilsyth Stadium where, yeah, there was just so many problems with that building, we didn't know where to start. But anyway, I'm happy to be here. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Amanda. Fiona Simmons.
Oh, yes, you got that one right. Well done on your pronunciation. No one ever gets that right. I'm the customer experience design specialist at the City of Port Phillip. So one of the many attendees today from the City of Port Phillip. We've got a big interest in this area. Part of my role at council a big part of my role is to improve the customer experience across everything that we do. And obviously universal design is a really important part of that. We're also all about uplifting capability in terms of human-centred design and trying to make everything as inclusive as possible. So really interested in this group. Thank you.
Fabulous. Thanks. Aaron Hunter? Sorry, have you already gone?
Yeah, I've already gone.
Oh. I'm losing track now. Oh, look out. Loris Young.
Hi. So just want to thank you as well. I think it's fantastic that you've got us all together. I'm interested in hearing from other councils, particularly councils that have been able to include universal design in their policies. And I'm from the City of Yarra, Access and Inclusion Officer. So thank you.
Great. Pleasure. Lovely to meet you, Loris.
Louise.
Okay, now we're getting to the pluses. Leonie, I can see you up there.
Hi, Leonie Cleary. I'm the Disability Access and Inclusion Officer for the City of Glen Eira. We are implementing a inclusive towns concept, and obviously universal design is paramount for that to occur successfully. So very interested in everyone and what they have to say.
Thanks, Leonie. Hi. Alana, are you there as well?
I am. Hi, everyone. Alana Lucas, Access Inclusion Officer. We have a action in our inclusion plan, which is to develop a statement of commitment around universal design. So I guess it's a precursor to the policy, but to start that progress and the change of culture and educating our organisation on what it is first. So yeah, super excited to be here.
Yep. We've all got to start somewhere, don't we?
We do.
Thank you. Aldona?
Yes, hang on, just let me. Yes, it's Aldana from Banyolo City Council, and I am the Streetscape Urban Design Officer. So, yes, we very much interested in universal, design being sort of, the principles of it to be included in development or creating public realm, which is, all inclusive and it's in general increase awareness of the requirements.
Great. Thank you. Welcome, Aldona. Alison Treaty.
Thank you.
Hello, Alison Treaty here from Knox Council. I'm working in disability inclusion and just really keen to learn more about universal design and how we can incorporate that into the things we do at Knox.
Great, welcome. Thank you. Attilio?
Yes, good afternoon. Sorry, I'll put my camera on.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Attilio from the City of Port Phillip. I'm the coordinator of civil infrastructure construction, and I certainly welcome the opportunity to learn more about universal design, and so that we can become fully aware on ways in which universal design can be implemented in everyday design that we undertake on capital works programs.
Fantastic. Great to have you here from that department.
Thank you.
Fabulous. Barb Wallace. Don't think we've been.
Hi, I'm Barb Wallace, City of Monash. I am the Access and Inclusion. Actually, I don't have an official title yet, but essentially the Access and Inclusion Community Development Officer. And I also sit on our COVID Incident Control Group. So just really keen to continue the journey on universal design and trying to bring others along that journey with me. And that goes from everything from including emergency management through to all aspects of council. It's sometimes a hard slog, but one I'm still happy to chip away at. And I hope I get some ideas on how to do some effective chipping from you guys.
Yep, that's how we have to keep doing it. Persistence pays off. Thanks, Barb. Catherine Grant.
Hello, yeah, I'm an access consultant and occupational therapist. I work for Architecture and Access, and we do a lot of work with local government. So yeah, very interested to hear how you're all working and how we can assist. But also too, I'm working with Deakin on research projects regarding universal design and hoping, trying to work with some OT students to build some knowledge in this area as well. So yeah, really look forward to hearing what you're all up to.
Great to have you. Thanks, Catherine. Chris McLean, have we met you yet? Chris, are you there? No, I just saw Kelly pop up, so I might jump to you, Kelly. Hello.
Hello, thanks, Virginia. Hello, everybody. I'm one of the very excited people from the City of Port Phillip. Excited because we have so many representatives at this network, which is, it's very promising. I have worked at Port Phillip for quite a while now, over 10 years, and in what was formerly known as the Metro Access Officer role. So my background's in occupational therapy. Universal design makes a lot of sense, and it's great to have all these multidisciplinary perspectives in the one conversation. So congratulations, Virginia, for bringing us all together. Let's see what we can do.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Kelly. We've got Clint Watchman next.
Yeah, thanks, Virginia. Apologies, my microphone dropped out a little bit. I've been having issues, but I'm the coordinator of urban policy here at Salisbury Council, work in the same organisation as Michael Taggart, and we do land use planning, sort of broad scale urban design, but also feed design advice into council's development projects and also the private sector applications and some of the city infrastructure projects as well, streetscape projects. So just interested in learning from the group and best practice and how we might feed that into all the work that we do.
Great, thanks, Clint. I think there's a couple from Salisbury Council, and I think we've got people from 4 different states perhaps today. So that's fabulous to have that comparison. Evelyn Chin.
Hi, I'm Evelyn. And I'm from Manningham City Council. I'm an architect, primarily working in the project management for capital works for our building. The challenges that we have when it comes to refurbishing our building are that a lot of these buildings are quite behind in building regs compliance, especially the access issue. But sometimes or most of the time, what we want to achieve are quite restricted by what budget we have. So I'm interested in seeing how other local government go about approaching issues such as these, and what sort of innovation they have, and what particular areas they might play emphasis on when they were restricted by what they could do.
Great. Yeah, I'm sure that's a tricky one for a lot of us. So thank you for that. Joanne Bedford.
Sorry, hi. So my name's Jo Bedford. I'm the Access and Inclusion Officer at Latrobe City Council. So I'm interested, I guess, foremost about continuing to influence our infrastructure teams on incorporating universal design, but also learning about new ideas and areas. Yeah, thank you.
Great to meet you, Joanne. All right, we're getting there. Leanne Davis-King. Leanne?
Yep, sorry. Hi, I'm Leanne Davis-King. I'm from the City of Port Adelaide Enfield in South Australia. I'm the Community Services Leader here, so I have oversight of our Disability Access and Inclusion Plan, and we've got a real interest in designing a universal design policy and looking at training and implementing it across council. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks. Welcome, Leanne. Marinda Ward.
Yeah, hi. So I'm from the Local Government Association of South Australia, and I'm here today because Michael Taggart invited me, which is great, thank you. And because I helped councils last year with their disability access and inclusion plans, and we're currently setting up an advisory group for councils to support that community of practice. So I'm really open to learning as much as I can from this group.
Great. Welcome, Miranda. I've got so many questions for you all, but I'll just try and get through everybody first. Natasha Bowers.
Hi everyone, I'm Natasha Bowers. I work at Brisbane City Council. I'm the key account manager there. I'm really a town planner. We have an incentive called the Universal Housing Design Incentive to facilitate a pipeline of accessible housing, and part of my role is to facilitate that development through the pipeline. So I work with our in-house planning team and with our customers to streamline that process.
Right, Natasha. I think that's everyone. So if I've forgotten you, can you quickly put your hand up and or speak up and let me know? No? Woohoo! Okay. So there's 32 of us in this meeting, which to me says that we've struck a chord here, and when I spoke to the MAV, we've got a local government universal design network as part of the MAV. They definitely agreed that this is a gap and an opportunity to bring people together. So I guess, yeah, the fact that you're all here today speaks volumes to that, and thank you so much. So yeah, heaps of different themes, but a lot of similarities, certainly to my experience and to others that I've already spoken to about their universal design journey. And I think it's great that we've got people from all different departments and stages of readiness. I don't think any of us have got it all completely sussed, but someone who has been working in this field for a very long time, as he mentioned, who I'm really stoked to have here as an introductory speaker, I suppose, is Michael Walker. And Michael, I'm not sure, we didn't rehearse too much what we're going to talk about, but you could probably talk about anything and it would be interesting. Do you want to maybe talk about where Victoria's at as a state with universal design? Because I think it was Michael Taggart identified that we're probably ahead in some ways, but I'm pretty sure that other states are doing great work as well. So can I hand over to you, Michael?
Thanks, Virginia. Thanks for giving me the carte blanche to talk about anything. I've probably spent half of my time talking about Richmond Football Club, but I won't bore you with that. Look, it is actually it's a bit overwhelming for me to see a number of people from local government to want to find out or to practice or become practitioners in this field. I was also in local government too, but what I find with local government is that they are at the coalface and they are the people that do real change. So it's very important how that works too. So my journey is that my background is that I spent a lot of time in sport, such as I'm a triple Paralympian, but I also learnt a lot while I was playing sport overseas, and I was fortunate enough to meet Ronald Mace before he passed away, and we had this conversation about what's accessibility versus universal design principles, and that struck a very strong chord to me. The other thing is that I also was one of the first access auditors in Australia, and that even brought it home even further that what was in regards to national codes or building, wasn't even national codes at that particular point in time. It was a standard called AS 1428 that sat there, and it wasn't really enacted into any building codes. And lucky enough, we got that into the premises standards to implement that. But that only tells a little bit of the story, and it was really interesting to hear Kathy talking about plain English. Universal design learning is very big in a lot of the educational areas, the pedagogue, how to do that. So when I talk about universal design, there is a lens on the built environment, but universal design is principle based, and it talks about the diverse nature of everyone, which takes in the built environment, but also takes in ICT and all those other things that don't get spoken about. And we refer to the invisible disability that does get dropped off a bit, you know, the cognitive, the neurodiverse, all those types of things that need to be considered. There is things that are happening in government I work with the Victorian Health and Human Services Building Authority. That's an authority that sits at DHS. It's the largest infrastructure funded department now. It's outstripped the transport. And they've made a commitment to universal design as a policy. But also I put a policy and a charter together. And that policy makes it mandated for every health infrastructure going forward from now on, has to demonstrate the use of universal design in their approach. Now, that comes from big builds such as hospitals, through to aged care, through to community centres, but it also goes into models of care that we need to look at. But the reason I put that into place is to formalise a lot of the things that were going on about universal design. And I'll take a step backwards because I started most of my work on universal design in sport and rec. And I created a website called Design for Everyone, which is the largest website on universal design in the world in regards to 11 elements in the sport and rec field. That's a very good resource. So that started that off, and then I managed to get that department to make it mandatory in all their guidelines for local government to demonstrate universal design. Now, the first 2 years, the language is a little bit light. It had, and this is very important to remember when you're putting policies and also guidelines together. Please do not use the word consideration, because that's the best outcome ever. So what I did is that I gave 12 months for sport and rec and working with it, with the launch of Design for Everyone and some consultation to up the ante and say you have to demonstrate universal design principles. It tends to get hijacked into accessibility, and we know that they work together, but they are, one is principle based and the other one is based on a set of standards to try and avoid discrimination and building codes. And we know if you only go minimum requirements in the built environment, that does not give you good design. So we need to up the ante on that. But one of the things that I found a lot easier to implement policy is I raised it to a very high level from departmental heads. That this is all about the Human Rights Charter. This is not about a legislation that sits here or whatever. It is primarily about the Convention on the Rights of a Person with a Disability, human rights. Now, if you go to that, you'll see, we being Australia being a signatory to that if you look at Article 4 and Article 2, it talks about universal design principles as the only way to create an equitable society. So that's the big high level framework that I use to get a policy. Now, that's just not for state government, that's for every authority, and local government as one. And in actual fact, Victoria's actually got a legislation act, it's called Roles and Responsibility of the Human Rights Charter and what we have to respond to. So how does that fit to what you do? Well, the first lesson I learned is this: if you get a policy and a charter and a commitment, that will give you more skin in the game to influence all your different departments. Now, even from a point of view of asset management, ESD guidelines, all those things play a very, very big role in universal design. And if you go into our website at Victorian Health and Human Services Building Authority, you will see the new ESD guidelines is all about universal design. The new engineering guidelines is all about universal design, because we know that that is important than just meeting standards. And what do we mean by that? Is it's actually the courtesy of COVID-19 that brought a lot of the things that I was talking about to the fore. For instance, in engineering, if you use the principles of universal design, it talks about creating something where it's safe environment, and that could be from a point of view of the air that you use, what types of things you use. So all those sort of things come into it. And it's very important that why do we create a built environment and have an emphasis on that and not talk about the soft infrastructure, like the information, the perceptible information, how to read things, because universal design talks to disability, and disability is the largest consideration but not the only consideration, because we have to look at universal design as a diverse way of designing, because we're all different. So we have to look at the other things that we're looking at in regards to the First Nations peoples, intersectionality with the LGBT community, all those types, gender neutral toilets, all those sort of things sit under universal design. So my first approach was, yes, I can demonstrate that at a lower level, but I need a commitment. Now, after this department's committed, I suggest what's happening now is that there's going to be a whole of government policy, this is the Victorian government, to universal design. There's a draft policy in Cabinet at the moment that all departments and all funding and authorities have to demonstrate universal design in their approach. Now, there's certain departments that are up front and there's certain departments lagging behind. Now, how's it going to work? Well, there's so much work that has been done. And I think the biggest people, or the biggest influence and enablers, is people like yourselves, because you'll be talking about universal design, because this is about trying to create an inclusive society, but it's also talking about equity, and that is so important. There is equality, and we know that equality is, yes, that's a talked about subject, but universal design talks about you have to design for everyone. One size all does not fit, and there is a problem with why we talk about equity and equality. So we're based on equity, and diversity is enabled by inclusion, and inclusion is enabled by equity. So that's very important. So let's get back down to the cold face and you guys sitting there, all the people in your inclusion areas. I'm looking at, I take a role also in other government departments to creating the diversity and inclusion plans. I suggest that you should be bringing all the different plans together to have more of a strength in about diversity. We have the DDA action plans, which talks to a particular legislation, but there's other things that need to be concerned. There's women's issues, there's gender neutral issues, there's Indigenous, there's non-cultural. So universal design encourages all that together to create a strong approach to local government and the diverse inclusion area. Now, that's a big ask, but the problem is my role in here is to change other departments thinking that way, because we still fund based on disability, based on women, based on LGBT, based on Indigenous, instead of funding everything as a diverse nature, and it should be just a consideration in any funding going forward. So that's the role I'm doing at the moment. For instance, any sort of policy that comes up needs to have a good lens across it in regards to universal design and what it meets. And please jump in if you want any questions, to answer any questions. But the thing that I'm finding a little bit difficult at the moment, we're starting to get a language that's coming in and talking about universal access. Now, there's two, they're very distinct. Universal design is principle-based, whereas access is based on a set of requirements, legislations, and building codes. So they are not interchangeable terms. They should be separated as a philosophy. And I think it was Annie Ireland talking about inclusivity and talking about user-centred and co-design. And that is very important how you do that. But how do you engage engineering to talk about the same things that you guys are talking about on the other side of the organisation. Well, there's a number of ways. It's actually getting a commitment of a policy in your local council to have a culture shift in thinking. For instance, I think there was a lady from Queensland. We're talking about that's a really good approach. But housing, there's another thing that's coming up very soon about accessibility and housing. So what my role is, any funding has to go through an evaluation criteria. How we start is it's in the planning. So I always say you have to bake it in, don't bolt it on, because that's where the problem is. So let's look at planning. There is a real issue in planning, I believe. If good councils get really, and most of you guys are doing great jobs, but the influence of planning is so important. You should be having in your DDOs, which is your design and development overlays, you should have in your planning scheme a commitment to universal design, because that starts the conversation in your planning. Because if it's not there, it won't be mentioned. And the only time that you guys will be picking that up is a building permit. And when you get it to a building permit, it only states that you have to meet requirements, a minimum requirements. So it doesn't talk about the things that you want to change, like the neurodivergent issues of autism or things like that, colour, use of colour, the biophilics, all the things that are not sitting in a standard. So my position is standard is the actual building codes, or the National Construction Code is the platform, and you build from that. Because you have to meet them anyway, compliancy-wise.
Michael, there's a question from Natasha. Natasha, do you want to speak to that?
Yep.
Statement?
Oh, it's not so much a question as a statement, as we wanted to put some comments in our planning scheme in relation to universal housing design, and the state won't let us.
Yeah.
That's regulated by the building code and the NCC.
Yes. So that's what we're, Natasha, that's what we're having a very big fight with the ministers' forums as we speak. I've done a lot of research. We've done action research on that and influencing that. There's a lot of influence from property council on those types of things. I suggest that's where the culture has to change in that way. Victoria's quite prepared to go further than changing looking at the planning scheme and changing that, because even if we have a thing called VCAT, Natasha, you understand what VCAT is?
Yeah, we have something similar.
Yeah, and that's where cops, if something goes and gets a planning permit, and there's no mention of what we're talking about, inclusivity or universal design, it doesn't get mentioned. It only gets to the building permits, and the port councils have to say yay or nay, and they say yay because it meets compliancy, but it doesn't talk about the other things. So it really is important in the planning. So from a building authority, Victorian Health and Building Authority, it is in our planning. So we can go to councils, and we have other mechanisms where we can change that, but it talks about in the planning. That's one part of it that you have to understand. The other is when you're getting funding from government, you have to remind your senior peers that we need to meet these requirements to get the funding anyway. So they need to be aware. In Victoria, yeah, I'm only talking about Victoria. Yeah. I hope this spreads like wildfire, because there is a national push on this, and councils need to do it. And Paul, as I said before, local councils are the ones that implement the most change in communities, and they need to have some sort of strength in their approach to that. So from a state government point of view, all funding going forward will have to demonstrate universal design, and that's going out into the local council areas, but also other authorities. So it is so important from a practitioner's point of view that this is not something that's just come out of the blue. This is a human rights approach. It's a high-level approach. And the first thing, if you can, is to try and create a very strong policy and charter. Hobson's Bay has a statement, but that needs to go further. You need to have that as part of your approach. Any more questions? It's, I guess, Virginia, where I find it very difficult is the level of engagement at local councils into these social justice issues is a little bit wanting. What I mean is, do you identify who's going to be the driver in this? How do you get people to get to the table? I suggest one issue is that we have a bag of money, and if you want to get that, you need to have universal design. And at least that's a big stick approach, but at least it gets you to the table and having discussions.
At our own level of funding and grant submissions, you mean?
Right up to what you want out of state and federal government, or especially out of state government.
Yeah, and I agree. I'm sorry, Kathy, you've got a question in a minute, but there are some things that the Victorian government have in place around infrastructure grants, but I find that in my experience of working on projects, it's not as strong as it could be. And I don't know how much reporting and checking there is afterwards to see if projects have actually met what they said they would do. It's one thing getting the right words in the grant submission, and it's another thing to actually follow through and make sure that gets done.
Yeah, there is a lot of processes put in place. Obviously, post-occupation evaluation needs to put in place. Traditionally, what happens with in the built environment is that you only get a post-occupancy evaluation done to see if it meets compliancy. We're changing that in VESPA to look at the social values and the social change. If you create a park, if you create a stadium, what's the social value that has on people, and does it change its lives? And that's very important in hospital, because in the hospital health area, that we are creating environments where we can say it makes difference and it changes people's lives through a social value approach too.
Yeah. Kathy, do you want to speak to your comment?
Yeah, sure. Just following up from a comment that Michael just made around, it's all, the built environment is sort of the obvious place to start, but the importance of ICT and communication, and as he described, the invisible disability and the invisible non-inclusion. The Victorian government, it's only the Victorian government who actually have accessibility guidelines around government communications, which you're all meant to follow. And in that, it lists the essential need to use Braille when it's requested, to have Auslan, to actually have easy English. So it actually is written in that guideline there. And I don't know of any other states that have done it. That's been around in Victoria in various forms, but it's been around for a good 15 years. So if your local governments aren't on top of that, it's something that needs to be addressed as well.
Kathy, would you mind sharing a link to those guidelines?
Yeah, sure. I'll pop it up. I'll put it in the chat.
Okay. So I'm monitoring the chat if anyone's got questions, but has anyone got one outside the chat? Any or thoughts on what Michael's speaking about?
I guess one that is very important. I've just finished doing guidelines for people with autism in emergency departments, which is a very, very big issue. And that's not talking about the built environments that were in the Australian standards. It talks about what's the use of colour that you're using, what sort of smells, all those types of things, light, circadian rhythm, all those sort of things that actually trigger hypersensitive things off. But the thing is, you start looking at that from that point of view, it has benefits for everyone, because you're going in an environment, in a hospital, an emergency department, you're not going there to have a good time. So you're heightened anyway. So you're trying to calm people down. And it's the same what we're doing in aged care. We're trying to use a lot of those home approach to design biophilic, which means nature. That means that you're bringing that in and out. That all comes under universal design. I'm doing some work with First Nations in regards to their Indigenous charters in design, and it talks about identification. You have to, and universal design talks about that, the positive self-image and social status of that. So when you talk about universal design, it goes right across the gamut of diversity. And it's the same with the conversation about gender neutral toilets versus male, females, all those sort of things need to be discussed, because that's a real issue. And I'm doing some work on that in regards to how we do gender issues in regards to toilets, because it's a real issue. It's a health issue, because people don't go to certain toilets because they feel afraid and all these sort of things. And that comes in about universal design too. So from a local government point of view, there's enough information and case studies going on to get the artefacts together to prosecute. I noticed David O'Reilly's there, and I had a workshop with him. Everyone agrees that at a certain level, it's the next step up. How do you get those people engaged? And I constantly always put the premise towards CEOs right through that this is about human rights. And if you want to argue about human rights, go for it, because it just doesn't stand up. Mm-hmm. So, and that's and a lot of councils are very positive, and they want to represent their community as such. So state government can do so much, but it will support local councils at a very high level to implementing universal design.
Yeah. For Kathy, and also what you're talking about, Michael, the language is a really important thing to sort of consider in all of this as well, in the terminology that we use. So Annie was talking about inclusive design, human-centered design, and you're saying, you know, UD is not universal access. We have a lot of officers that call things like a DDA toilet or a DDA playground. So, you know, there's a lot of lack of understanding around all of the different legislation and what things mean. So, yeah, I think having a policy can also help with defining terminology and explaining to people, you know, being a platform to provide that education around language. But I really like what you're saying. Sorry, I'll come to you in a second, David, about diversity. And we've been consulting across teams recently on our disability inclusion plan for the annual plan, and meeting with economic development and tourism, and I finally got to this aha moment. It's not just about designing for wheelchair users, which is usually the first thing that people get in their minds. It's we've all got diverse needs, so the idea of designing for diversity is really gaining traction in the conversations that we're having as well. David, did you want to speak to something?
Sure. Thank you. Thanks for the pep talk too, Michael. Much appreciated. Just further to moving forward, a set of guidelines would be quite useful to actually sort of explain how, let's say, universal design could be demonstrated in a local government context, both for our facilities, but also to advocate for developers to think about it at the forefront of their design, especially the ground floor. Given we've got the area of Fisherman's Bend that has a lot of inundation issues, and it lifts the ground floor, and also we're talking, you know, wholesale redevelopment of some streets. So what sort of elements would be appropriate to deliver the principles? So I'm hoping that somehow we could, either as a group or VESBA can advocate for a set of guidelines that might help us advocate for improved outcomes.
Don't want to put you on the spot, but Emily, do you want to speak to this, or someone else?
I can, Virginia, if you like, because we're actually doing work in that area as you speak, Dave.
Sure.
Yep. And you have to understand, with the Victorian Building Authority's Plan Melbourne, and also the infrastructure plan, they are actually saying that these things need to be put in place. And I guess the guidelines also, we've spoken about this from a local point of view, from a local council, you can still have the framework, but it actually encourages what the nuances of that council's about, and always stick to the principles and try and keep the outcomes. And the good way that I do it with from transport right through is that I concentrate on the outcomes first and then flip back to the principles. And so you can demonstrate, why are you doing this? Well, we're demonstrating that we need cultural compatibility, we need identity, we need understanding, and all these types of things. And then you can go back and using the principles to try and implement that.
Yeah.
The other thing I think is very, very important with universal design, it is very much that, it's universal. But the other thing is that you spoke about Virginia is about everyone's impaired. Any sort of day, any time we're impaired. Okay, and I talk about 3 types of impairment, and that's the permanent impairment, like myself, who's a paraplegic. But there could be temporary impairments, but there's also those situation impairments that people are in. And that could not just from the built environment, but it also, as Kathy talking about, how do people are trying to use a certain language. So you can imagine someone in the COVID situation where the most vulnerable were really in a lot of trouble, trying to communicate and finding out what's happening from non-English speaking to cognitively impaired, all that sort of things, or just getting a particular form to cross the border was horrendous. But we should be looking at the ICT, WAG information, accessibility in councils and also organisations. So we're all impaired. There's no one, if anyone's not impaired in your 32 group, I want to talk to you because I've never met anyone that's not like that before. So how it really is what you're trying to do is to create an environment that's inclusive, it understands what it needs to be done. Now, it's a fairly simple ask, but the implementation is very difficult. The simple reason, I think the simple reason is that in regards to all the different bureaucratic things have been put into place, and a lot of those things have been put in place because of the fear of the unknown. They think it's going to cost too much. It'll cost too much if you don't put it into the front end of the model and discussion. It'll cost at the other end. As a department in DHS 6 years ago, they were spending more money on refurbing houses because they didn't have those features in first off. So we should be putting them in first so that'll stay and ageing in place. Home is where the health is and hospitals is for repairs. So if we create environments where they can stay home, it doesn't have an impact on the acute health system too. So, and we need to change the way we deliver our health, our model of care, because it's all based on burden of disease and all these types of things. So, and it's really interesting when I start working in the health area, the first question I ask the CEOs and the actual minister, who stays in the hospital the longest? And everyone looked at me and I said, the staff. And you don't plan for them. Because in building codes, you can actually deem to satisfy and don't have accessibility features in the back of house.
Yeah.
Now that's ridiculous.
That's a great
And it's the same in council too.
Yep, and
it's the same in council.
Yeah. Barb, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I stuck my hand up because Michael, you were just talking about emergency management and universal design principles in regards to I guess it's disaster management at the moment, isn't it? Or it was emergency management now. I know EMV are looking to redo their guidelines. I don't know what they're called, a booklet or whatever that they did a few years ago, and it's a series of about 8 different workbooks around emergency management for, I don't know if it's specifically for local government, but it might be. It would be really great if, like I try and advocate, people know I'm going to open my mouth on the topic because I do everywhere I go. It'd be great if when they redo those booklets, and I believe they're doing it now through EMV, they would talk about universal design principles in that, or do a real guidelines on how to do that in emergency management. And that goes down to even like what you were talking about before about the importance of universal design. A lot of like emergency relief centres, for example, are in old scout halls or pavilions, and they're not accessible. And, you know, we need to start future proofing buildings, because we never know what those buildings are going to be used for. And I just wish you could maybe get in their ear.
Well, Barbara, they've obviously got 2 ears, so they can afford one to be bashed. So you can link me in, because the other guidelines we're doing constant guidelines, and I can come from a strength from the point of view that this is what the Victorian government wants, and this could be seen as a national approach to this. You're very interesting. See, emergency standards still don't deal with people with disabilities in emergency situations in high rises and stuff like that, and also all those sort of things. So it's a real issue. And Michael would understand it's from the vision impaired and right from the hearing impaired to both Michaels here. They don't consider that under the standards, which you know, it's no good having hearing augmentation if you can't see it, and vice versa.
So Michael, would you be happy if I emailed you then?
Yeah, not a problem.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Oh, good one, Barb. Nathan, you've got your hand up.
Thanks, Virginia. I was just interested, Michael, in what you're saying about that intersectionality across different disciplines, and they all converge on similar design solutions, which is quite fascinating, actually. I've noticed that in the environmental thing, like you've mentioned, that it comes down to basically just good design. If we can just design for people. I remember when I was at the City of Melbourne, that Places for People thing was pushed very hard, and often we don't design for people. So I think there's a basic premise there that if we focus on people, it's a good startup. I've noticed that there are some competing factors at work, and compliance mindsets have sometimes ended up with people like I've had 3 or 4 times where on major infrastructure projects trying to get people across arterial roads, a pedestrian bridge is proposed, and I say, you do realise that's like more than 100 metres of ramp, you know, like that's not actually very welcoming or inclusive. So and in Yarra Ranges in particular, we've got crazy topography, like nuts constraints. And so I think if we can have less of a compliance mindset and more of a welcome mindset, then we can try and find solutions that may not be perfect, but they'll at least improve people's lives. Because what we will find, and I'm quite concerned about this with our project we shape up, is that we will end up immobilised and unable to deliver projects where we are. And so that's a bad outcome, because some of the stuff that we're dealing with are horrendous drop-offs in topography, which will result in no space to deliver the inclusion. And so I want to try and just have that conversation around pushing for improvement where we can't get pure compliance. And if we are pushing for compliance, that has a broader consideration than just, you know, Australian standard requirements, that there is that experiential layer applied to it.
Yeah, and I think, Nathan, the other thing that should be explored, especially with building compliancy, is that it's a performance-based solution and there's deemed to satisfy. And I think that should be tickled out a bit more to actually get better innovative solutions instead of having compliant ramps that's got handrails and TGIs, and you can't do that because it's going to be 3.5 miles long to get to the place. I guess from my point of view is that when you're looking at topography or constraint sites like Yarra, and it's the same where I live up here in Mansfield, up in the hills, it really is that innovative thing is what you're trying to do to get the outcomes. And because you have to understand that we live in a very litigious society, don't we? We don't want non-compliancy because we might actually get sued for it or whatever. But there is innovative ways of making that adjustable so people can get access. and Catherine Grant's there. She's probably dealt with a lot of those types of things. So, and the point of old buildings versus new buildings, well, I think there's a lot of innovation if you sit down and start going through it and coming up with different applications. For instance, I've just finished doing Boating Victoria down in Morty Alley, and they said you cannot get compliancy because the ramp will be too long. No, what we came up with is that we actually use the tide as the enabler of access. So we created the piles that went up and down and created a gentle ramp instead of having a hard, fast metre, 9 metre non-compliant ramp. They didn't think of actually going the other way and using nature to get the actual outcomes. So created a ramp that was flexible and still met compliancy, but it was well above compliancy because we went through it and used the principles to come up with a solution, not just tick boxing, this is not compliant or is compliant. So I think that's a very good point from Nathan in regards to how do we actually get universal design outcomes. Let's take a step backwards. When I was first put in the chair, there was no access. So we've come a long way. And we can keep going further on that. But the thing is, in a lot of cases, if you just get compliancy, usually is a fairly good outcome anyway. What I'm advocating is if you've got a brown field versus a green field site, the green field is going to be more chance if you get it up front end of the model to get the principles in to get good outcomes. But also in a brown site, you can have good innovations to get the outcomes too. So it's really interesting where in regional Victoria you have all these fantastic buildings that are just not getting used because of the ageing. But then we're looking at hospitals in the regional areas. A lot of those can be used just for allied health because the function fits them better, but use the buildings. And it's the same with councils. Councils has a lot of assets that, if they can look at, can be purposefully fit for certain activities. So it is a hard thing, but then again, it's a lot better to just get compliancy in certain outcomes than not compliant at all. I see there's another question. Is there any more questions?
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, Michael's got a question.
Michael.
You're muted now, Michael.
Yeah.
You're doing my trick.
Yes, thanks. I'm one of several Michaels that appear to be on this panel, but look, thank you, Michael, for this. This is a very useful refresher course. I was just intrigued by a couple of more recent comments, one from you, Nathan, about the topography of the Yarra Ranges and Michael's own references to regional councils. And sort of it occurred to me that one of the significant barriers to these types of, especially regional communities, is the lack of community transport. I'm aware that the discussion around universal design often refers to fixed assets. And it just occurred to me, is there a way of looking at universal design principles for something as elusive as community transport, which is a critical means for people to be able to get around and to actually get to use these buildings in the first place. So just thought I'll just throw that up for if there was any comment on that.
Well, I could certainly make a comment on that, and I can tell you what's going on too. In community transport, especially, well, you've obviously got a lot of happening in regards to access and getting into those particular vehicles. It's interesting that the transport or Department of Transport, they have a number of remits and contracts out to Vic roads, not Vic roads, to different bus lines. Now, even in Mansfield, you've still got, you can't just go to a bus line and take a bus to Mansfield, for instance. You have to book in advance. It's 2020, for God's sake. And we've been going on about accessibility into transport, but that's been based around the industry and how they were making buses too, because they were high level bus design, not low level, and getting access into buses. And it's the same with community transport. We know that we'd actually, in Vespa, we will fund vehicles and they have to be accessible, Michael. If it's a community transport, they have to be accessible. So there's that sort of push. And yeah, unfortunately, with the transport, they've got their own standards to meet, and they're just meeting them right across the board. And they're having an inquiry into that to make it even a lot better. So there's a lot working in transport, but the problem is they talk about universal design, but they're only trying to, the outcome is to meet compliance.
Yeah. I was just thinking when you were talking, Nathan, as well about inclusion versus compliance and the scope for maybe not always meeting the access standards when there are insurmountable challenges. We've had a conversation again with economic development and tourism in terms of accommodation, providing information about how accessible their accommodation venues are, and sites like Airbnb have started to have criteria for accessibility, which sounds great in one sense, but the user experience has found that when you filter out for access, you're left with very limited choices of accommodation to choose, because only a few have either filled out that part of the form or meet the criteria. So what a wheelchair user in our instance has said is that the information provided is vital for them to be able to make their own decision about whether they can whether they can work around the constraints. So it might not be, a size toilet that meets a standard, but if they can sort of either see what it is and have some information provided. So, it's not just about whether we're complying with WCAG and the other things to provide the information. It's what information we're actually providing to enable people to make their own decisions about things, which I thought was a really interesting take. Just basic compliance.
Accessible tourism. Victoria misses out on $1.3 billion worth of accessible tourism dollar because they're not getting involved in it. And then we're getting
Melbourne Uni data that you're quoting.
Oh yeah. There's so much research on this. It's it would out when the pandemic and we're having issues with China and trade. Accessible tourism was outstripping what was going to be lost by the Chinese trade. But it's interesting in regards to that, we have certain languages coming in to the tourism, Airbnb and other places, accommodation. They use the word user-friendly, like wheelchair user-friendly. But it might, you try and get into the place, there's no step, but there's no amenities inside. So there's all those sort of things. And I guess it's the real issue of not ignorance, but when you actually say it's compliant or it's user-friendly or it's accessible, they're all things that need to be really teased out, because it's a huge market that hasn't been tapped. And I'm not just talking about the built environment, I'm talking about the sensory, I'm talking about the cognitive, I'm talking about customer relationship, all those sort of things, which means a lot, because I'd love to go from here to Adelaide without ringing up 500 times to get a accommodation, to find an accommodation that's accessible. It is 2021, so we've been banging on about this for 15, 20 years. And I think we need to step it up, and I think guys like yourselves putting this network together will give you strength in your arm to go forward and say this is a call for action, and we are diverse in our nature, and this is not just social value. There's also economic value to all this that I'm talking about too.
Yeah. Mark, I think Mark Kunatz, you had your hand up, and then Alana.
Yes, one of the great issues we're having in New South Wales is the government use of contractors. Whilst we might have a culture of access and inclusion within local government, that doesn't always filter through to the contractors that are employed. One of our biggest issues is that we might put in some very nice accessible footpaths in Parramatta, and overnight a utility contractor may come through and dig up that footpath and dig up some of the accessible tiles and backfill it with bitumen. It's no longer as accessible as it once was. Yet some of those utilities may have their own disability inclusion action plan, but that culture still doesn't filter through to the contractors they employ. So they're doing a job, but the spirit and intent of the access and inclusion part, or the disability inclusion action plan part, is not in their scope of works. Their scope of works is to dig a trench across a footpath, and they backfill it. But it's not, well, you need to make sure it's accessible so it's nice and flat like it was when you started. So that's a huge issue we're having with AGL, all the utilities, and I'm not sure what it's like in Victoria. I haven't been there for a while, but in New South Wales, the footpaths are used as a convenient spot to stick all the utilities and the kiosks and the pit covers and all that. And you might have an accessible footpath, but all these utility access points, it becomes a bit like pedestrian motocross.
I haven't come across that one, but I'm in a regional area. Do you have to give does council give permits for those works?
No, that's the problem. If it's a state or federal utility, they don't have to tell local council anything. They can just go for it.
And that's a very good point, because I went through it personally where I was when I was living in Melbourne, and I got to the nab of that. And what it was, it has to be built into their contract too, to replace to what it is. So it's important, and that's one of the things you have with the civil engineer, and that's why we concentrated on putting in that engineering guidelines. But it also gets back to the tender briefs and the contracts and evaluation of that when you get your contracts out. And the other thing that I find that where the gap was is we can talk about having universal design and designing and then building it, but the construction industry needs to understand what we're talking about too. So I'm working on what they call NatSpec, which is a non-for-profiting organisation that give technical notes to the construction industry in regards to how to build properly. And they're just doing a suite of universal design tech notes. So when the buildability phase is finished and someone's building it, at least the construction guys understand what universal design's about and the impact of them to filling it. Because what has happened many times is that even in local council is at the end of the project, shortcuts occur. And those little shortcuts probably cause more issues than the bigger picture, because they're little things that have been cut.
Yeah, I'll try and find the link and share that with everybody, Michael. But yeah, that sounds like a pain. another thing to overcome. Alana.
Yeah, but Virginia, in regards to engineering and the people in council, they understand that. And the same with your planning environment, the same engineering and assets, they understand all those sort of things. It's just keeping that link going through the process from start to finish. I know it sounds idealistic, but it's doable. So that's why I get back, if you've got an overarching policy that demands this process going forward, you will have other units in your organisation need to follow suit.
Yeah. Alana, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Virginia. This is so good, this conversation. Like, again, thank you for organising this. It's yeah, it's really inspiring. And my question's probably it might be for later. I want to know who in local government land has a policy, because I think I recall someone saying that they did, and how they've gone around the implementation of that, given the complexity that we're talking about, in which sounds like the complexity is around the many different business units that we need to embed the said policy with. So yeah, and I don't know if that is for a later time or another meeting, but just keen to hear some examples.
Yeah, no, look, Emily's got her hand up and she can probably speak a little bit to what they do at Cardinia, but that was one of the questions when I asked people to sign up for this network, was whether they had something in place or not. And I think there's only 2 or 3 that have actually got a finalised policy. Hobson's Bay have got a policy statement. I think Latrobe, Brisbane have. We're developing one at the Mornington Peninsula, and Cardinia are developing one, but they've had standards in place for a long time. So
yeah,
Emily, do you want to go for it?
Thanks, Virginia. Thanks, Emily.
I think in line with what Michael was saying, we have an enhanced standard for access, implementing universal design principles. But I think where our gap is the principles in, the broader theory about how we can impact people's lives. So we have a big document that was built by I noticed one of the architects is here today, so Access Architecture. We worked with them to develop our framework, and then we have a bit of a massive Excel spreadsheet that I suppose people can check what's been achieved and document variances where we're not reaching our accessible design standards. And it's not just based on the minimum. We have like a gold standard of what our expectations are, so going above and beyond the minimum, which was really exciting to have council adopt that. I did have a statement or a comment, Michael, about planning and private versus the public space, and we're a big growth area, and we have a lot of developers working in our area, and I like the concept of having a big universal design statement, but it's hard for us to implement when developers come in and go for the minimum. We also recently submitted into the Planning Authority their consultation paper about the greenfields approach, and I noticed in there was no reference to universal design, which was really disappointing. And there was a comment in there about them setting the floor and not the ceiling, which was a bit concerning to see that. I was just wondering what your thoughts are on how we can, I think we're downstream as council. We're dependent on having those policies and plans in place before they get to us. I don't know. Is it the chicken?
No, let's. Well, you fry an egg and you roast the chicken. Okay.
Okay.
Emily, I'd love to talk to you about that. The simple reason is that I've been involved. I also look at VCAT. I am a critical observer of VCAT because it's committed to, it's committed to making a fair hearing. And one of the things that keeps popping up is the planning amendments. And if you have a development overlay and it doesn't say anything about enhanced accessibility or DDA, the developers are not going to worry about that. Why would they be seeking that out? But there is another one. The major construction firms, such as Lendlease and Metricon, are putting universal design principles in place because it's an economic advantage for them, because they're selling more houses, because that's what the customer wants. And it's not about disability. It's about young families and all those type of things. And you can see what's happening with the accessible universal campaign on housing. Now, from council's point of view, there should be a social value mixed up of how that works in regards to growth areas and how it works. And look, down the track, it's going to be some features need to be put in place, because affordable housing is not up to state government. Affordable housing is up for everyone, isn't it? It needs to have that. But people will say, how can you build? I don't want to build I don't want to be told to build a house that's for people with disabilities. There is the rub. There is the ignorance, and there is the attitudinal indifference that we're talking about. Yeah. Stigmatising things.
Unfortunately, we've only got 5 minutes left. I thought this might happen. It starts to get interesting towards the end. But Alana, your question is quite a good lead on to what I was going to say about next steps. So I'm proposing that we get together quarterly. I'd love to meet more often, but I know that we're all really busy, so I feel that's achievable. And I've asked Emily already, and James actually, because I know of their work, whether they'd be willing to speak more to their policies and approach at the next meeting. So would that be a good way of interest to everybody to speak to? Yep, I'm getting a thumbs up from Alana. It's one, yay.
Yeah.
I also wanted to just spec the Universal Design Conference that's happening in May, and I'll probably be running a little workshop for local government people in the lunch break or something. So I'll let you know about that, and if you can come to that, we can meet in person. And I'd also like to get permission to share all of your emails. So I might do a BCC and just get feedback to see how people feel about that. Alana?
So.
Oh, hang on. I think Alana. Were you about to speak, Alana? No? Oh, okay. Sorry. Sorry, Michael. Go.
You've got my details, and anyone that's in this meeting or this network is quite happy to run things past me or whatever if I can assist going forward, because, as I said, I've got really good networks right throughout the government at different departments.
Oh,
so I can
sorry.
assist.
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, I think we've got some glitching going on. But thank you, Michael. That's an awesome offer.
Yeah, not a problem. Not a problem.
All right. Yeah, because I think it would be great to be able to generate some discussion outside of the meetings. I'm loath to set up another Teams group because I've got too many already. But no. If anyone's got a good idea about how we might keep in touch, in the meantime, I'm open to suggestions. Yeah, what else did I want to just make sure that I touched on? That's it. Oh, look, the only other thing was around, so today we've had people mostly from local government, but a couple outside of local government. I'm open to hearing people's thoughts about whether they just want it to be for local government people or if you're happy to have it wider. My perspective is, I guess it adds diversity, which is what we're kind of about, to the conversation. But, you know, if there are things that people feel that they only want to discuss amongst local government, I'm happy to have that feedback as well. So give me your thoughts about that. Yeah, you've just asked about the recording. I would love to send that out to everybody if you're all happy with that, because I haven't taken any typed minutes. So that could be one record, but I will probably make some notes and forward them on as well. Yeah. Okay. So that's all from me. Has anyone else got anything they'd like to add at the last minute? Thank you so much, Michael. Been fabulous.
It's my pleasure. I just hope that South Australian mob get off and give me a call, because I wouldn't mind going over there, because they've got some really good stuff going on.
They've got some nice wineries.
Exactly, McLaren Vale. I expect Michael to take me there if I get over there.
Yeah, great.
And Michael Uniac, let's get in touch again and start doing something what we were going to do before the pandemic, brother.
Yeah,
thanks, guys.
And sorry, Chris or Craig, I didn't get back to you, and I think we had someone else join late. But yeah, there's going to be a lot to cover, but we'll do our best each time. Okay. All right, we've got someone off mute. Cool. I'll see you all in 3 months, and I'll be in touch before then.
Right.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Julia. Thank you,
Thank you.
Michael.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you all.
Okay.
Thank you.